gorgeous, divine women. My name is Dr. Alexandra Elinsky, CEO of Empowered Human Potential, LLC, an executive coaching, leadership development, and corporate training organization serving clients globally. Welcome to episode 1 of the Abstract Baddie podcast, where I will be covering an array of topics to help you become the best, brightest, most sparkly version of yourself. So, because this is our first episode together, I would like for you to bear with me. I'm just going to be honest and say that I'm a little bit nervous, which actually surprises a lot of people because a lot of people say that I'm great on camera, and I'm actually very nervous. So I just want to be open and vulnerable about that because I'm going to be talking a lot about being honest and being truthful and being transparent and authenticity and all these different words and themes and patterns that you're going to see me repeat over and over and over throughout each episode that we do together. So the very first thing that I want to do in today's episode is I really want to set the stage for this podcast. And I am a woman in this modern era, which, we all are, and we face different struggles and challenges and opportunities compared to the generations and decades of women before us. And sometimes these waters are very hard to navigate because as children, we receive training from our parents, our grandparents, our primary caregivers, right? And those people that raised us, and they passed down to us values, beliefs, ideals, traditions, teaching, and instruction that they were brought up, and they kind of taught us this is the way that it is. This is how life goes, and this is how you have to be. And some of those things may still be applicable today, and we know that, and that's great. And then other things, not so much. We live in a world with technology and AI that is rapidly changing. Every year, year over year, our world changes so much. Things never ever stay the same. So as women, one of the most powerful things that we can do is make ourselves adaptable. Be ready to change, right? Be ready to embrace challenges, transitions, surprises, curveballs, right? That's going to be so important for us. So throughout this podcast series, I'm going to be covering so many topics. It's going to take a lot of time to get through all this stuff. But I want you to be aware of the overarching theme, because this is the most important thing, is this overarching theme. And my objective in starting this podcast, in alignment with my business, in alignment with my Girl Grit book series, is to build a secure, worthy, confident, badass, bullshit-free, effervescent, and brilliant woman who is not afraid to be herself and live her life. And we're going to get into a lot of things, and I'm just going to give you little by little by little so you can kind of go right along with me. So what you see here, my natural environment right here is, this is my Zen room. This is my Zen room. It's a room in my house that I literally turned into a Zen room. There are no electronics in this room. The only thing I do in this room is I pray, I meditate, and I read. That's it. That's it. I have candles, I have it decorated very serene, soft music, but no electronic devices. This is a place of emotional grounding, peace, solace. I'm going to be talking a lot about emotional mastery, peace, throughout probably all of my episodes. A lot of the topics I talk about are very transferable, which means there's common themes, there's patterns, etc. So this is my Zen room, and I'm always going to start each episode with what I like to call emotional grounding. It's where we take a few seconds, maybe a minute, to really center and balance ourselves and really control ourselves emotionally so that podcast is all about listening, right? It's all about listening to the speaker. And if you're going to be in a place of listening, right, and learning and taking in and conceptualizing and thinking about you really have to be at this place of emotional centeredness. So let's take just maybe 5 or 6 seconds together and really get into that space right now of calm and peace before we go any further. Okay, very good. So I'm also going to start each episode with some affirmations that I wrote, that I say to myself often, and I want you to say, I'm going to go a little slow with these because I want you to say it aloud to yourself after I say it. So I'm going to say the affirmation, you say it aloud to yourself, because I don't want you to just hear it from me. I want you to hear it first, and then I want you to say it out loud, because it's not going to be real unless you say it out loud and you put that thought out there and you put those words out there, and right, you realize these things, you actualize these things. So the first one is, I am a secure woman. Number 2, I am always the right choice. Number 3, I don't give people the power to reject me. I do not allow disrespect. I am in control of my emotions. I am brave. I am allowed to be myself. I am powerful. I am confident. I am worthy. I am allowed to make mistakes. I am ready to transform my life. I am at peace and I am happy. I create the life I want. Men find me irresistible. I am hot shit. I live with purpose and intention. I have a million friends and I'm a very lovable human. I am magnetic and I attract what I want. All right, very good. So today's episode is called Creating a Secure Woman. And I'm going to talk about what security means and what it means to become a secure human being. And this is a topic that I have wrestled with for a few years now. And it's not something that I've actually mastered until the last year, literally like the last 365 days. And I'm going to share, so I'm going to start with a story. Before I get into the instruction and teaching part of this, I'm going to open with kind of a story so that I can make what I'm teaching you and sharing with you a little bit more relatable, okay? So most people would probably argue that throughout my life, I've been a decently confident person for the most part. I haven't been perfect, but I've always tried, right? But I've always wrestled with being insecure. And I think insecure is a word for men and women equally. This actually doesn't just apply to women right now. For men and women equally, that we can all resonate with to a greater or lesser degree, because we all have insecurities. Now our insecurities are different and vary from person to person, but I'm going to share this story that's very, very near and dear to my heart, okay? So here we go. This happened and within the last couple of years, I've been using dating apps and meeting people online, and I had a gentleman, a man, who not that long ago actually asked me out on a real date, and he was very persistent about it, which I thought was cute. And the funny thing about this story is that, looking at his dating profile pictures, I actually really didn't find him to be attractive. I mean, just going off of pictures and looks alone, I didn't really find him to be very attractive. But he started messaging me and he started, responding right away, and he seemed very interested and very engaged. So I thought, okay, I'll give this guy the time of day, even though I myself am not really interested in him. So we matched on a Wednesday, and he asked me out on a date 2 days later on Friday. And in my opinion, I thought that was a little fast. So he's like, oh, can you go out tomorrow night, Saturday? I'm like, no, sorry, I'm busy. He's like, okay, well, tell me when you're free. And I'm like, I've got next Tuesday at 6 p.m. available. So, I go on this date with this guy, not really, thinking a whole lot, not really getting my hopes up. I kind of just Honestly, the only reason I said yes to this guy is because he asked me out on a date. That's the only reason. I didn't do it because I thought he was cute or I liked his pictures or that I was attracted to him. I literally just went out with him because I got an offer. So we meet up at the restaurant. He actually made a reservation, which I love that leadership. I love the initiative. That was very attractive to me. And I saw him in person for the first time, and I think my jaw dropped to the floor. I mean, he was absolutely beautiful, like just absolutely beautiful. And the very first thought that came into my head, and I don't even know why this thought came into my head, but it did nonetheless, is the thought was that he's too attractive for me, or he's too good looking for me. And psychologically and subconsciously, I immediately put him on a pedestal, thinking he was better than me or better looking than me, and I devalued myself. And looking back now that all this time has passed, I can't believe I had that thought. And I don't even know where that thought even came from, why I would think that he was too good looking for me or he was out of my league, as they say. So we have this wonderful date. He's a great conversationalist. Like, everything went super well. And I kind of just walked away not really knowing what was going to happen next, but being cool with everything. And he asked me out on a second date on the first date. And I was like, heck yeah, like, let's do it. Well, the funny thing is that particular week I was actually extremely busy, and I turned him down about 3 times. You know, he said, are you available Thursday? No, I'm busy. Are you available Saturday? No, I'm busy. But we did end up getting together, you know, the following week. So I was actually like playing hard to get without really knowing or realizing I was playing hard to get. I was just naturally busy. I was living my own life, as we should all be doing. So, you know, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and everything was progressing well. Everything was kind of moving ahead, right? There was no ghosting, there was no, you know, losing interest right away or anything like that. He continued to pursue me. He continued to ask me out on date after date. He would set up dates, he would make plans, he would make reservations. And in my girl head, you know, he was taking that male leadership role. And this is going to be really key because we're going to talk a lot about this too. He was taking that initiative. And I'm not going to lie, it was very attractive. It's very attractive when somebody kind of pulls the bull by the horns and says, hey, this is what we're doing, you know, do you want to come along for the ride? And again, in my girl brain, and I'm being very specific here, is that I just went along for the ride. You know, he was taking me on a roller coaster and I was all in because I thought, well, he's leading, he's taking the traditional male role, I'm going to follow along. And that is partially where I made my mistake. And see, this is where it's going to turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the time I was dating this man, I was feeling very insecure. I had the heebie-jeebies. I had the collywobbles. I really liked him. He made me very nervous. You know, I definitely was feeling the spark and the butterflies and all of that. And I just remember being very insecure, almost as if I was sitting on the edge of my seat our entire relationship, waiting for him to break up with me at some point or lose interest in me at some point, almost as if I was waiting for those things to happen. And so after several weeks, couple of months, I couldn't, my stomach started hurting. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was always waiting for his next text. I was always waiting for him to make some kind of a move. And I just got kind of really anxious. And I remember having a conversation with my mom on the porch, almost in tears. And I said, Mom, I'm a very insecure girl and I don't understand why. I don't understand where any of this is coming from, why I have the heebie-jeebies, why I get so nervous around him, like why, you know, I'm getting the butterflies all the time. Like I don't understand the root cause of my insecurity. So at that point specifically, this really catapulted me into really digging deep, far, 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 far beyond the surface level, and really kind of going back in time, you know, several decades ago to when I was a little girl and I was first put on this world, you know, this earth. Where did all this come from? How did this originate? How did I get to be this way, right? Well, you know, the truth of the matter is it really became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm going to explain that in just a couple of minutes because 3 months into our relationship to the day, he broke up with me randomly, out of the blue. Nobody saw it coming, and he broke up with me because he said he lost the spark. Basically, he fell out of love, he lost feelings, and he just broke up with me, and it totally became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the good news, there is a lot of good that actually came from this. Well, first of all, let me start with the bad news. The bad news is that I was devastated. I probably cried for weeks. I was just angry. I didn't know what I did wrong. Like, it was like the perfect relationship. I was doing all the right things. He was doing all the right things. Like, nobody was arguing. Nobody was fighting. Nobody was cheating. Like, what the heck happened? This is like the picture perfect romance, right? Like, you know, he was even, and I'm not even going to get into these details, but he was doing things, very strategic things that was signaling to me that he was thinking long term. You know, I can't say he was thinking about marrying me necessarily, but he was definitely thinking long term, because he was doing things, and the relationship was definitely progressing, and it was moving forward, and he was, you know, very consistent. I was seeing him every week. Like, everything was lining up, you know. And I had been dating for a while to know, like, what's legit and what's not, who's interested, who's not, you know what I mean? I had some experience prior to that. So, let me regroup for a second here. So I was devastated. But the good news about this whole thing is this situation specifically forced me to become a secure woman, because I ended up reading about 500 dating books. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but I really studied dating coaches, and I really bought all these courses and read all these books, and the pieces, you know, it was like taking a little bit from this, taking a little bit of that, taking a little bit of that. All the pieces started to come together, and it really kind of like the light bulb went off. The light bulb really went off. And a few months later, I was at this huge convention, you know, in another state with thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. And the speaker turned off all the lights in the big auditorium we were in, and music was playing, and he was talking about limiting beliefs. And he was talking about limiting beliefs, and it was funny because he was talking about, well, limiting beliefs in my profession is something that it's a term I'm very familiar with in psychology. I use it with my clients all the time. So I'm sitting there kind of like laughing, like, oh, limiting beliefs. Like, I don't have any limiting beliefs. I'm a psychologist. Like, you know, because he was kind of preaching to the choir. Like, I know what limiting beliefs are, and he's like, what are your limiting beliefs? Write down at least 3 limiting beliefs. And I'm like racking my brain, like, oh my gosh, I don't have any limiting beliefs. I don't have any limiting beliefs. But then through digging deeper, I discovered that I actually had one very big, very nasty, very scary, and very powerful limiting belief. And that limiting belief was, I am unlovable. And it really hit me, because I really believed, past tense, that I am or was unlovable. And what I learned is that if I can't love myself, who else is going to love me? And I just remember in that auditorium, the lights being off, the music playing, the speaker on stage, people were just like crying, like screaming, like it was like demons. Like I felt like demons were coming out of people, and like the tears were rolling down my face. I think I got on my knees at some point, and like everything just dramatically changed within an instant. My whole life flipped outside on its head. It just revolutionized my whole life. And in that moment, I finally began to love myself, and it was no longer I am unlovable, but I am lovable. And I want you to understand in this very moment that our internal belief system, what we internalize, is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful, your beliefs, okay? And beliefs, I'm gonna stay with beliefs for a minute. Beliefs, when you're a child and you're born, that's when your beliefs start forming. And we're going to come back to childhood in a few minutes here, because I'm trying to keep us on a trajectory, on a timeline. So, my life has honestly never been the same. And through this process, I became a secure. And it's so funny, because now, after the fact, all this came and went, right? I have so much love in my life. From myself, from others. I have so much love, romantic and otherwise, friends, family, clients, colleagues, animals, the universe. it's just pouring, you know, out of me and coming towards, like a magnet. I'm attracting it, right? It's who I am now. And we have these beliefs, and I really want you to kind of think about what yours might be. Maybe yours is I am unlovable, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it doesn't have to do with love. And, you know, a lot of times, another thing I discovered is that when I'm with my clients, one of the big questions I ask them, and I say, hey, I really want you to stop and think about this, you know, for a little while, is I ask them if they love themselves. And a lot of people tell me that they don't. So I want you to stop for a minute here. I'm going to keep talking, but I want you to really ponder that question. Maybe don't answer it right away. Like, ask yourself, do I honestly, truly, authentically love myself? I really want you to think about that, because if the answer is no, sister, you've got a lot of work to do. But so think about that question, and think about maybe some other limiting beliefs, okay, that you may have. So this is really where we're going to talk about, you know, becoming a secure human being, because I believe, so a lot of the work that I do through and through, and I do a lot of different things, but it really kind of circles back to this element of healing. And as human beings, you know, life, let's not bullshit ourselves. Life is painful. I don't know one person who has a perfect life, okay? People may portray on social media that they have a perfect life, but that's just a facade. That's just so fake. Nobody has a perfect life. We're all broken to a greater or lesser degree, right? We've all been hurt. And when you get hurt, you know, whether it's by yourself, people, situations, environments, like, they do form insecurities. Insecurities come from a place. They didn't just poof, you know. You're human, right? We're imperfect. Life is not perfect, right? Like, you can't, when you're born, like, there's so much unknown. There's so much uncertainty. You don't know how your life is going to unfold from the moment that you're born to the moment, you know, you die, hopefully in old age and not any sooner. But you know, so your life is, you got to think of your life, okay, here you are, you're born, okay, you're 80, 90, 100 years old, you die. You got to think of your life as like a timeline, right? You start out as a baby, then you're a child, then you're like a preteen, teen, young adult, older adult, you know, and then you go with an older adult, right? You kind of just progress through life. And everything you go through, whether it's positive or negative, is an experience that you're meant to have. And I'm going to talk a lot about pain too, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground. And like I said, if I mention something and I don't elaborate on it, that just means it's going to be for another episode, because I'm going to try to keep everything very centered and focused and streamlined. So when we talk about, you know, security versus insecurity, you really have to go back to the time that you're born, right? And every one of us is born into some kind of family or some kind of situation that you didn't get to pick or choose. Your family did not pick you. They had you, but they didn't pick you, and you didn't pick them. So you were just given to these people, essentially, right, who have a history. All right, no matter how old your parents were when they had you, they've already lived so much of their life, and they're already in a certain stage of their life. So if, say, your parents had you when they were 30 years old, they've already lived 30 years of their life and have 30 years therein of history, and 30 years worth of belief systems, values, ways of living, different philosophies, political beliefs, religious beliefs, right? There's all these things that make us unique and make us different and make us so diverse from the other, right? So, the truth of the matter is, and this is going to be a little, uncomfortable to say, but it is the truth because I've done a lot of research on it, is that there are a lot of children, experts say more than half, and I do believe it is quite more than half, who are abused and or emotionally neglected to a greater or lesser degree. Now, I'm not going to talk about abuse today, but I am going to talk about emotional neglect because emotional neglect is more common. There is a belief system, particularly from older generations, because I think in our generation now, in our current generation, we do have a psychological awareness. We may not be perfect, we may not even believe in it, we may not practice it, but we have a psychological awareness of human emotion that generations, decades before us didn't have to the degree that we have it. They had it, but not at the intensity awareness level that we have it. So a lot of parents from these older generations believed that as a parent, their job was to put a roof over your head, to feed you, to make sure that you practiced good hygiene, to make sure that you had clothes, your basic necessities, you lived hopefully in a safe neighborhood, went to a decent school, that you had those physical and physiological needs taken care of. But what many parents did is that they weren't cognizant of their children or child's emotional life or emotional world, because they themselves as a child did not have their emotional needs met. So a lot of people don't like emotions, or they're uncomfortable with emotions, so they just kind of shut it out, right? They say, suck it up, put on your big girl or boy panties, don't cry, stop crying, don't get angry, whatever the case may be. They just kind of turn off the emotional switch. And so if your grandparents did that to your parents, and your parents didn't have your emotional needs met, it is very likely, not guaranteed because people can change and be different, but it's very likely that this idea of what I call emotional neglect, where your emotional needs were not given thought, consideration, or attention to, is passed down generation to generation to generation. So there's a saying that everybody's familiar with. It says, children should be seen and not heard. And I want you to let's stop for a minute and think about that, because this is an important point. Children should be seen and not heard. If you're a child and you're told that you should be seen or not heard, or if you were seen or not heard, you're going to feel invisible. Why? Because every human being, whether woman or man, needs to be seen, heard, listened to, understood, noticed, and they need to feel important and significant. And this is where a lot of our core wound, or our deepest wounds, are first formed in childhood. And so in childhood, we are required to become far more resilient than what is recommended, right? Because children should be nurtured, they should be emotionally nurtured. And a lot of us either develop emotional, maybe walls where we just shut out and shut down completely, or maybe we become very, needy and sensitive and insecure. So there's kind of like a couple of different avenues or routes that, directions that you can go in. But irregardless, it forms an insecurity, and thus an insecure attachment style. If you have an insecure attachment style, that means that your emotional needs to a greater or lesser degree were not met. Now, the reason why I say to a greater or lesser degree a lot is because everybody's individual situation is different. You're not exactly the same as me. I'm not exactly the same as the next person. We're all different. So those of us who have experienced emotional neglect, it is to a degree. Some people are completely emotionally shut out and they're on the far end of the spectrum, and other people might be maybe the emotional attention was more inconsistent, where maybe sometimes they got love and attention, and maybe sometimes it was withheld. So they're maybe kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So there's kind of a range going on. You kind of have to really think about and really reflect on where exactly you fall, so that you can understand yourself more. Because really the whole idea of this podcast is for me to help you understand yourself more, to really know, to really understand, and really discover yourself. Because when we understand ourselves and we take that power and that control and that ownership over our lives, we can create the life we really want. I'll be talking about that too later down the road. So anyway, so this is where, in my book, I say this is where a lot of our insecurities are formed. And what happens when you have insecurities is that they grow. Okay, they're infectious. They're like a disease. They grow, they spread, they snowball, and they manifest, and sometimes they get really, 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 really big. And I have a philosophy that all of us who seek romantic relationships or romantic intimacy or connectedness are doing so because we are looking for the love in our partner or significant other or in someone else that we didn't receive as a child. And this is why so many people struggle in romantic relationships. And this is why romantic relationships can be so toxic and so chaotic and so tumultuous, because you have two different people from two different backgrounds and philosophies and belief systems and values and way of life who are trying to, do life together, and it can get a little, sloppy. So, but we're seeking that validation. We're seeking that security. We're seeking that intimacy because we want to be seen. We want to be wanted. We don't want to be discarded, but so many of us were discarded. So many of us were unwanted. Even if you weren't completely unwanted, but maybe you were cast aside. Maybe mom and dad was too busy for you. Maybe mom and dad had such deep pain and such deep emotional wounds that they didn't even know what to do with it, right? They never got healed or healed themselves. So they kind of ignored you, maybe not on purpose. It's not like they were, intentionally trying to ignore you. They just naturally ignored you because they couldn't handle their own emotions. They couldn't deal with their own trauma. They never healed themselves. So they weren't able to be an effective parent. I believe that no person should become a parent unless they are fully and completely healed. I'm going to say that again. No person should become a parent unless they are fully and completely healed. This stuff is huge. You guys got to understand this stuff. If you don't understand this stuff, you're going to have problems the rest of your life. You're going to have problems the rest of your life. And it's not just relationships or romance or love. It's everything. It's all that, you could take any topic and substitute it in here. So, what's the answer? What's the answer? Well, the answer isn't necessarily an easy one, okay? But the truth is, the step one, we'll just say step one is understanding or recognition. You have to recognize, you have to understand the root cause. I'm talking about the root cause right now, okay? There's this childhood emotional neglect. And you have first step toward progress, or a huge first step towards growth and healing and personal growth. And so your parents are not responsible for being. You're responsible for it. So there's a trick here, and I talk about this a lot. It's the process of reparenting. And you're going to hear me talk about reparenting a lot, because what that means is that you have to recognize that now you are your own parent. You were brought into this world by your parents, who may or may not have parented you, but irregardless of what they did or didn't do for you, you are still responsible for reparenting yourself. Because I promise you, if you don't take ownership, if you don't heal, if you don't improve, you're going to have problems the rest of your life. You're going to wonder why, all these bad things happening. You're just going to be bringing all this trauma and pain because things manifest, right? Good turns into better and bad turns into worse. Everything kind of, it accumulates on top of each other, right? It gets compounded. So it's this understanding, this recognition, and it's really seeing your childhood for what it was. Not what it was portrayed to you to be, but what it actually was. And I'm not saying parents are bad. Parents aren't bad. There's no such thing as bad people. There's such thing as hurt people. There's such thing as people who just didn't know any better. There's such thing as unhealed people. And if you're a child who suffered to a greater or lesser degree in childhood, then there's a really good chance that your parents also suffered as children and that your grandparents also suffered as children. And if we don't put the kibosh on things, if we don't take ownership, we keep passing it down. Your kids are going to suffer too. Your grandkids are going to suffer because you've got to put the kibosh on this. This is the most important thing you'll ever do, is become a secure, healed human being. That's why this first episode that I'm doing is on this stuff. So this recognition, so now that you have this recognition, you have this understanding, well, what's step two? Step two is reflect. You gotta eat on this. Okay, so we are going to be wrapping up our first session right now, but there's a lot of good stuff here. So we're going to continue on in episode 2. So see you soon.